Hi, everyone.
Hello, we will get started in 3 minutes. So we're just going to let everybody join and then we'll start at 33 plus 12. Hi, everyone. Welcome to All in Tech's first ever Upskills webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our topic today, which is product management, failing fast and learning quickly. I'm Varuni Fernando, and I'm the product manager at ResMed's Digital Health Technologies Labs here in Dublin. And I'm also the co-managing director for All in Tech in UK and Ireland. As our first event, I thought it would be really important for us to speak a little bit about All in Tech and why we created this organization and launched in March 2021. So our vision is to create 10,000 tech opportunities for women and people of color in the workplace by 2030. And the way that we envisage doing this is through our mission, which is to enhance tech education, advocate for the underrepresented minorities in tech, and to foster a connected community. And so today is very much the start of where we are trying to enhance tech education. And this is through our Upskill webinar series, which we think will help you learn and grow to cultivate your future. I'm starting with today's session that you're all here for, and we're going to be having another session next month hosted by Preetham Singhvi from our team, who will be speaking about building a website without code on the 14th of July. We'll take a break during August for the Northern Hemisphere summer, and we'll be back in September with Natasha Jade to speak on an introduction to biophilic design. We do have next month's event already available on Eventbrite, so you can register there as well for July's event. Let's have a look at today's agenda. I'm going to start with an introduction to myself and my career so far. We'll then go into some basics around what is product management and what it isn't as well, because I think there's a bit of discussion around what this role entails. We'll then go straight to ways to discover new products and talk about experimenting quickly before we go to Q&A. I will be doing a fairly long Q&A. We should have about 20 minutes for Q&A, so please feel free to put your questions into the chat and then we will cover them towards the end. So let me tell you a bit about myself. I studied a Bachelor of Engineering, Electrical Engineering in Sydney at the University of New South Wales. And I joined ResMed, a medical device company which specializes in the treatment of sleep-disordered breathing and other respiratory diseases in 2015. I joined as a graduate, which meant that I was able to go on the graduate rotation program. And that allowed me to experience quite a few different disciplines and types of engineering in my first 2 years at ResMed in Sydney. So I started in manufacturing engineering for our product, which was quite new at the time. This was for AirSense 10, a device that's used to treat sleep apnea. I then moved on and did electrical design, so very much what my degree had prepared me for. designing a connectivity module for our ventilators that connected into hospital data systems. I then had my first taste of product management in the product management of a digital product, which was also new at the time, our patient-facing product called myAir, which helps patients with sleep apnea track their CPAP therapy or the therapy that they're getting for their disease through their mobile phones and through a website browser as well. From there, I moved into systems engineering, and I was part of the systems engineering team that launched the Air Mini. So this is the world's smallest sleep apnea treatment device, and we're all very proud of it. It got launched in 2017. And I got to stay in systems engineering for quite a few years. In fact, I stayed there until September 2019, doing systems engineering for both the Air Mini, but also for our next generation platforms as well. In September 2019, I had the opportunity to move to ResMed Dublin to join a new team, the Digital Health Technologies Labs team, which was given a specific mission. And I guess the reason why I joined this team was very much because I had spent most of my time working on product development that was for products that were about to go out in sort of the next 2 years, let's say, in a bit of a shorter time frame. And I had a desire to work on stuff that was earlier, so early product development. And that's sort of what brought me into this role. So I moved in September 2019 to Dublin. And from there, I got the pleasure of working with our senior director as well as our tech lead to recruit a product team. And so this product team really was about creating digital experiments. So we have a focus on digital health to support ResMed's future product portfolio. And I think the makeup of this team was unique in terms of my experience, but I think the actual combination of skills that it brings to the table is quite unique and has been such a pleasure to work with over the past almost 2 years. So this team consists of software developers. We have a research engineer, a product designer who looks after both the user interface sort of design work, as well as the user experience aspect of the products that we create. We have a behavioral scientist, and I function as the product manager. So we finished onboarding the team towards the end of January. And of course, as you know, in March 2020, we had the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And actually since then, basically after 6 weeks of working together in the office, we have been remote ever since. So we have not been back to the office. We have been completely remote, and that's been quite a unique experience, as many of you can probably attest to as well. In terms of my role on the team, as you can imagine, in a smaller team, often you take on not just the role that's maybe your title. I've had a couple of different roles in this team. Of course, I have the product management role, but I also have been managing some of the teams. So I have an element of team management in my current role, as well as doing some of the systems engineering, particularly when our team works on medical devices and there's a need for someone with a systems engineering background for the execution of those projects. I really enjoyed systems engineering a lot. I started actually a master's when I was based back in Sydney, and towards the end of last year in November, I graduated from my master's in systems engineering from Johns Hopkins. And then I think one of the highlights, of course, is the launch of All in Tech. So that was in March 2021, and that brings us to today, which is our first webinar, and I'm very excited to be here presenting to you all. So that's enough about my career journey so far, and you're very welcome to ask me questions about this in the Q&A as well. Let's get going and talk about what is product management. And I think when people think of product management, sometimes they go, oh, is it project management? And sometimes it can be quite hard to explain, what you do day to day, because it is a mix of skills. One of the people that speaks a lot about product management and is quite highly respected in this community is someone called Marty Kagan, who published a book called Inspired. In his book, he actually gives a very nice definition, or at least what I think is a really nice definition of what product management is. So he talks about that behind every great product, there is someone, usually working behind the scenes and working tirelessly, who led the product team to combine technology and design to solve real customer problems in a way that met the needs of the business. And there are so many bits of this. It's like one sentence, but I think it captures it really nicely. The first part is leading the product team. And often, my case where I actually have sort of a team that I'm managing directly is not is not the norm. It's pretty atypical. Generally, product managers are individual contributors. And so not only do you need to lead the product team, but you're leading without authority. So you need to have this ability to motivate and inspire the team to believe in the product vision that you have and believe in what you're delivering for your customers. This role also has a nice part of it where we combine technology and design. So it's not just the technology and maybe some of that work that I really enjoy doing in engineering, but it's also design and solving real customer problems. Taking the joy that I get from building new things and discovering new ideas to actually solve real customer problems is something that comes together really nicely in product management. And finally, there's this aspect of making sure you meet the needs of the business. Of course, you need to be able to do this, keeping in mind the constraints that your business and its specific, constraints are. So what are some of the key responsibilities for product managers? And this is also something that I took out from Marty Kagan's book, Inspired. So highly recommend that as a read if you are interested in this space. There's 4 key parts to this. The first one is deep knowledge of your customer. So this is understanding what their pains are, what are their desires, how do they think, how do they work, and how do they decide to buy your product or engage with it? Maybe it's an app, maybe they just download it. But understanding the workflow of how all these different people come to experience your product is really important to know. You then want to have deep knowledge of the data. More often than not, particularly in today's digital world, we do have data associated with our products. So that might be quantitative or qualitative data, but it is important that you're able to capture this data from your product and be able to analyze it to understand what your customers are doing with the things that you've put out into the market. You then want to have deep knowledge of your business. And when we talk about this, it's really understanding the constraints under which your business operates. Often in my role, this involves actually speaking to a lot of different stakeholders. So it may be legal, it may be our privacy team, could be our medical affairs team, as we work in a medical device company. But there's also people like senior management, sales, marketing, finance, business development, and customer service. So you are having to be quite aware of all of the functions in your business as you go on with your day-to-day work. Finally, you want to have a deep knowledge of your market and industry. So you need to know your competitors, but you also want to know key trends in the technologies that may impact your industry, your customer behaviors and expectations, and keeping track of relevant industry analysis. In my particular case, this involves not only keeping track of what sort of technologies are coming into play, there's also aspects of this that are looking at what's going on in the medical literature, for example, what's happening in clinical trials and clinical spaces, because this can impact what we do in terms of digital health. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of what product management is. Next, we're going to move on to discovering new products, which was one of the key things that we were going to discuss in today's session. Coming up with new products really starts with this idea of the product vision. And the product vision is a description of the future that you want to create. So it doesn't say exactly what you're going to build. It's a description of what you want to create. And in a digital company or like in a digital team like myself, like ourselves, we look at sort of 2 to 5 years. But when you have sort of hardware or device-centric companies, then the sort of full product vision is looking at the next 5 to 10 years. So it is meant to be something that is looking out into the future. If the product vision is done well, it's intended to inspire and motivate your team to come to work every single day. The idea is that the team is not wedded to a particular solution to a problem, but they are actually committed to delivering the future that is described in this product vision. So what forms can your product vision take? Well, one form is the storyboard, and I'm going to show you an industry example of the storyboard shortly. You then have the narrative. So this is very much written as it would sound, like it's written like a story, so that the story gives an idea of what that product vision should be. And then there's this concept of a vision type. So this is like a demonstration video that communicates the vision. The demonstration does not necessarily have to be real. It's just something that tells you what the product is intended to do. One really good example, if you are interested, is to look up the product vision for Dropbox. So Dropbox did a really early product vision in about 2008, and they showed some functionality. Some of it's smoke and mirrors, some of it is real, but it's quite exciting to see, what they had envisaged almost 13 years ago now, and how that was presented quite a little while back. So the industry example I brought for you guys today is Airbnb. And they had a project called the Snow White Project. And you're probably wondering, well, what is that about? Like, why did Airbnb decide to call a project the Snow White Project? The founders or the co-founders of Airbnb were inspired by Walt Disney's Snow White. And why this was the case was because Snow White was the first time anyone tried to create a feature-length animated movie. And so Walt Disney spent a lot of time creating these storyboards, of which you can sort of see an example on the right-hand side here, to make the task more manageable for his animators, so they could actually pinpoint the key moments of the story and then be able to separate out some of their work and their animations. So they were inspired by this. The Airbnb team were inspired by this. And so they decided to create a storyboard to show their vision for how the hosts and the guests would experience their product. So here's some key quotes from the co-founders of Airbnb. They said they started with many, many moments. They grouped the like ones together and refined them into a concise set. You see, they have many, many moments. Having a storyboard with maybe hundreds of moments kind of loses the point. And so what they did was they grouped them together and they came up with 2 storyboards. The first one was 15, frames that covered the guest and 15 frames that covered the host. And so here are some of the examples that you can see at the top of your screen. And so how do they use these now? Well, basically what their teams do is they align to a particular frame or a group of frames. And so if someone's got a new idea or if there's a problem in the current product, then they map it to a frame and they know very easily, which team is it, but more importantly, they know the impact on their customers because they're able to see the frame in the context of the storyboard. In fact, at Airbnb, they have these storyboards set out at the entrance to their building. So people know where it is. They see it every single day. And it's the sort of thing that is meant to inspire the team to come to work each day and to know exactly what they're going after. Which kind of brings me to the next thing, which is you have a product vision. Let's say you've built the most amazing product vision and you're ready to go. I guess, how do you execute on it? So this was a concept that was brought to us by one of our colleagues about 2 years ago from the user experience team based in San Diego. And she shared with us this presentation that was done at the Denver Startup Week in 2019 by these 3 particular authors. And basically the outcomes-based roadmap is considered a method for empowering your product teams to deliver the product vision. You see, often there's a lot of work done in creating the product vision, but how do you actually go and execute it? This was sort of an answer to this problem that people were starting to see when they went to do product visions. Now, I'm going to present a fairly busy slide here, but we are going to talk through it a little bit. So right at the top, we can see the product vision, and that could be, let's say, the storyboard like we saw for Airbnb. From there, there's a couple of goals that are associated or required in order to reach the product vision. So you try and break it down into a couple of different goals, and we try and use what's called the SMART goals principle. So S for specific, it needs to be a specific goal, it needs to be measurable, it should be attainable, so it needs to be realistic, it should be relevant, and it should be time-based, so it shouldn't just be an infinitely running goal. Once you have the goal, you come up with outcomes. So these are measurable things that you can see, is your product or is your idea actually successful? And so generally, there's a recommendation around 2 to 3 outcomes per particular goal. From there, for each outcome, you identify different opportunities. And so these are like things in your customer's journey. So things like customer problems, maybe their pains, some of their gains, do they have particular jobs to be done? And so these particular opportunities are what give your product teams an area to focus on. Once you have some opportunities and you found some, you can then go into an ideation phase where you come up with different ideas in order to, let's say, solve the customer problem. And of course, at this point, it's not necessarily quality, like you want to have quality, but you definitely want quantity too. And so part of this phase of going from just opportunities to ideas is that you are going to get rid of some ideas because some of them are just not going to work for you, and there'll be some ideas that you want to explore further. Once you have the idea and you want to move forward some more, you might come up with a solution. And so this is something that you can try out and see, does it actually solve the problem that you're trying to solve? Let's say that you've done a small test. Let's say we experimented quickly and we found out actually it is a bit of a success. Then you could look to scale it. Maybe instead of trying it out on hundreds of people when you tested it out, you now want to do it with 1 million people. And so you will go into sort of this delivery phase, and it kind of brings on that agile methodology that some of you may be familiar with around the delivery of digital products, but it can apply to hardware too. So for the focus of today's presentation, I'm going to look and focus on this section in the middle, this discovery section. So we're going to talk about how we find opportunities. We're then going to go to ideas and then look at some experimentation methods as well. I will preface this by saying that all the things that I'm presenting today are things that I've had the pleasure of experiencing and like researching and trying out with our team. So you are sort of getting the first-hand experience. I'm definitely not sponsored by any of the tools that I show you today. These are just examples that I've had the pleasure of using. So let's find out how we find opportunities. So there are a lot of ways to find opportunities. The first one is to review your product data. So where are people dropping off? Are people sort of making it from step 1 to 2? Are they making it from step 2 to 3? How much is your drop off? Are you dropping like 50% of your users from step 1 to 2? And if so, you should probably focus on that. What features are working? What are people actually engaging with? What are people using? What aren't they using, and why? So there is this part where you want to try and gather data from any existing products that you have to identify any pains that you could actually be trying to fix. We can then talk to customers and know their journey. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can engage customers. You've got sort of the traditional interview, which you can also do virtually, for example. That's a really great way to get qualitative data, really sort of in-depth, but it's quite hard to do hundreds of interviews, right? So if you wanted to go out and find out the opinions of lots of people, lots of customers, then you might use something like surveys. You might go out, you won't get as much depth in your answers, but at least you'll get quantity, and that's sometimes what you need. Our team tried a method called reflective records, and I was really lucky. Our behavioral scientist suggested this idea. And reflective records is where you give your participants sort of a set of prompts to talk about their experience. You might ask them maybe 10 different questions on a sheet, and then they record themselves in their own time, just talking and answering the questions. It's a really great way to get information quickly because you don't have to schedule time with them. They kind of do it in their own time and they send it through to you. But it does have the downside of that you can't follow up. So you can't follow up and ask them more questions about a particular thing they said. You kind of have to take it at face value. But these have proven really great for our team. And it's also been awesome because people can like listen to them on a walk or something like that. So the reflective records have worked really nicely. You can also observe your customers. So one of the ways that I found really helpful sort of pre-COVID days, I had an opportunity to go and see sort of physicians working in their environment and interacting with some of our software. And so even without asking questions, just observing how they use it, where they stumble, what sort of clicks are they doing on this particular piece of software can be quite interesting to look at. You can look at reviews of your products. I always find that with reviews, you end up kind of getting the extreme. So you'll get the things that people that are saying are the absolute worst about your product, and then, you know, the people who really love it advocating for it. So reviews are a good one to keep an eye on. You can also speak to subject matter experts in your business. So in our company, we're a pretty established company, over 30 years old. So we've got people in the business who've had many, many years of experience. And so they bring a lot of knowledge and ideas to the table. So it's really handy to speak to subject matter experts in your business, but you can also speak to leaders in your industry. So not necessarily inside the business, but outside, maybe in a parallel business. Maybe they're not necessarily a competitor, for example, but for us, it's like digital health experts. We might be speaking to senior management in some of these other companies. A service that we've used in the past is one called GuidePoint. Basically, you ask them for people from a certain industry, maybe with a certain job title or work experience, and then you get to have a 1-hour interview with them, which can be a really insightful thing for yourself and for your team. And so there's heaps of information at this point. Like if you've done all of this, you've got a lot of information. And at this point, I say, allow your team to immerse themselves in the information. Don't expect that you just dump the information on your team and then they'll get it and like suddenly have ideas on how to solve all the problems. So I think allowing your team time to immerse themselves in it, to go away and think about it for a few days is really important before you move forward to this idea of, or like the ideation session, which is coming up with ideas. So how do we come up with ideas? Well, some suggestions from experience: focus on one opportunity at a time, and in fact, try to really nail the problem that you're trying to solve. Include your entire product team and key stakeholders. So I think it's important to include your designers, your technical leads, and your developers. So both a combination of your really sort of technical, like engineering type teams, as well as the rest of your product team. I've also found that in the sessions that we include other roles and business stakeholders like business development, business owners, customer-facing roles like sales and marketing, and subject matter experts in your business, these are the sessions that we've probably had the most fruitful output. So having a cross-functional group in ideation is a really great thing, and it does take time and it can be hard to schedule, but it is worth it for the output that you get from the group. So what are some methods to help ideate? I think before I was in this role, ideation often included just brainstorming and like very little structure to brainstorming, but there's actually heaps of tools out there that you can use to help you ideate and get ideas for how to do this. One particular one is the IDEO design kit. So IDEO is quite famous. It's quite a famous design house. It's been around for quite some time. Some of their famous products are like Apple's first mouse, which is quite interesting, but they have a lot of different team plays or ways in which to carry out ideation. And so this is the link here. Some of the ones that I recommend just from personal experience is Mashup, which is where you kind of come up with these 3 different topics and ideas associated with it and put them together and see if you can come up with an idea to solve the problem you're trying to solve. Journey maps, storyboards, and brainstorming. And this is structured brainstorming. They have some good rules and things like a process to run brainstorming as opposed to just telling everyone to, yell out their idea. So the IDEO design kit is quite helpful from that perspective. The other one that I found quite helpful is the Hyper Island Toolbox. So I've also included the link and we will share the slides afterwards. But they also have a lot of different team plays that you can pick from. Not only is it sort of ideation related, they also have other ones like icebreakers and things. So if you are trying to get your team to get together and just sort of energize the room a bit, there are some ideas here as well that you might like to take on. So let's say you've got your idea now, you've gone through ideation. How do you experiment quickly? So one method that our team has been really lucky to use, and we had the buy-in to do it, was to run this Google design sprint. So basically the authors of this book were part of Google Ventures, and they came up with this 5-day process where the team gets together and they completely clear their calendar for a whole week. So there is definitely a level of commitment required for this. The whole team has to be on board for one whole week without other distractions. And this process, basically, you start on Monday trying to figure out what exact problem are you trying to solve. And then on Tuesday, you come up with different solutions. And on Wednesday, you pick which one you like best. On Thursday, the team gets together and they build a realistic prototype. And on Friday, you get it in front of your customers and get some opinions from it. What I found in this is the output of this is never like a product that you can ship to thousands of people, but it is a good way to get a validated idea. So you might be able to test it and see, do customers like it? Is this a complete fail? And that's fine as well. Sometimes you come up with ideas and you test them and they don't go so well. That's just part of the process. But if you do get a chance to do this, it is a really, really great experience. I would highly recommend getting the book for it, especially if you're planning to facilitate something like this. The book is very, very prescriptive and gives you lots and lots of input on how to use it. So like how to run the whole thing. So I would 100% recommend reading the actual book. But if you're just interested in the process, they have created a lot of 2-minute videos, like to a total of 10 to 12 minutes, that covers the process too. So you can learn about it fairly quickly. So let's see what happens next. Let's say you've got the idea and you want to test the value of it. So are people actually going to buy this thing? Are they going to be interested? And when you want to do this, you want to do this before you invest lots of resources in building the idea that you have. One method that we recently used was this idea of the fake doors experiment. So this is a bit of an industry standard that's kind of done quite widely. And the idea here is you pretend to provide a service or feature and you communicate it to the customer and ask them to act on it. So you try to pretend you're offering it and see, how many people come. But you have to make sure you don't upset your customer when they act on it. So you need to be honest in how you respond to their action. When you do this, you want to decide what level of engagement would actually make you move forward with your development. So have that in mind before you go ahead and have a way to measure it and then do it. So an example that I have here for you is this website called Notino, which is like a cosmetics website in Europe. And they had a very basic question: should we translate the website to French? And so what they did was they just added a button to their languages with French, and they tried to see how many people clicked it, and they measured how many people clicked it to see what is the demand for this website in French. And when people clicked it, they didn't try and hide. They say, it's not possible to change the language, and we're just evaluating it for your interest in the future. This was actually done in French, so this is the translated version for the purposes of today's presentation. But this is sort of a way that you can put fairly minimal development effort in. Like, you don't have to go and translate the whole website. You just add this button and a pop-up to deal with the action. And you get an idea of how many people actually want it. So let's say you've done a bit of validation. You know that the idea probably has some value. People seem to want it. Then you can go into some level of prototype testing. And at this point, I kind of think, well, what can you build without having to engage your developers and still have the ability to test with your customers? So our user experience and like product designers use a tool called Envision, and there's a couple of different tools that do this, but basically it allows for interactive prototypes. So this is just an example I pulled off the web, but it allows you to make it look really real. So you can put it onto a mobile phone or into a web browser, and people can interact with it and navigate around and give you feedback on, how it went, what they liked, what they didn't. And so using something like this, we're able to test without having to engage our software developers and their time and their effort to see if this idea is really going to float with our customers. When we run prototype testing, we really do try to recruit real customers or would-be customers. I think so often, particularly like university projects, for example, we will often engage friends and family, which is good, but engaging real customers is very, very valuable. I would highly recommend doing that and spending some time figuring out how to get access to would-be customers. We then ask our users to perform typical tasks with the product. So as a facilitator for a test, we might observe them, but we will ask them to speak out loud about their thoughts as they move through. Why did you do this? What were you thinking when you saw this page? Why did you press this button versus that one? We'd also record the time taken to complete a task. So maybe we would record the whole session so we can go back and analyze that and figure out where people stumbled or got confused. We also ask for their feedback, like what didn't they like? What did they like? What would they change? And one question that I think our team has come up with, and I think this is a very popular question with our user experience design team, is, if you had a magic wand, what would you change in this product? What would you make of it with your magic wand? We found, with COVID, we've been forced to go really remote, but remote testing works and it saves time with digital products. So if you're dealing with a digital product, remote testing works really great. Something like Zoom, you get people to share their screen, you can record it, it works really nicely. So there are very low barriers to running this sort of testing. Which then takes us to building a prototype solution. So let's say that user testing with that prototype went well and it looks pretty good, and maybe you made a few tweaks, and now you're ready to actually build a prototype solution with your software developers with a proper backend that's actually recording information. You want to go and recruit real customers or would-be customers again, and have some key results that you can measure to determine if you were successful. Definitely at the start with our team, we've definitely learned that making sure we have key results and things that we can measure and really focusing on that was exceptionally important. Let the product go out into the wild. So the more controls you place around it, the more it's not like the real scenario. So try your very best to try and make it as real as possible. One thing that we got caught out on at the beginning was being ready to provide customer support. So sometimes you think, oh yes, we've done the product and now we've let it out. And then you're like, oh, actually, there's like people coming back and asking questions, or they got confused about this particular button, or, they're having issues getting on. So be ready to provide customer support. It takes more time than you think to provide this sort of level of support. And bugs, like if you're dealing with software, you never get software out without bugs. So be ready, there will be bugs. There are definitely bugs in your code somewhere, you just haven't found them yet. So be ready to update your product on the fly. Be ready for that situation actually arising when you do it. And try to experiment as you go. So hopefully you've figured out what you need to measure and you're able to figure out what's going on as the experiment unfolds. Once you've done that, generally the last step in this is really, is it worth building at scale, or is it worth sort of adding more to it and moving forward from there? So there is this evaluation piece, and maybe you'll say, no, actually, we really shouldn't do this anymore. Or maybe you'll say, this was actually a really great success, we should fix a couple of different things, and then maybe we're ready to scale. So at this point, you wouldn't want to evaluate your idea, use all the learnings from your experiment to make a decision on what you do next. And so that is the end of my formal presentation. So at this point, I would love to hear if anyone has any questions. And if you do, please place them in the chat. Or you could, I think you can unmute yourself and ask if you wish to do that too.
Hi, Varuni. I have a question.
Hi, Dion.
How are you doing? Thank you for the presentation. That was great. Just curious on things like, obviously, that you've much experience in a short space of time, and with regards to mentorship, etc. How have you found kind of the mentorship support that you've either given or received that's helped those young entrepreneurs go with the process? Just any thoughts around mentorship?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's interesting because a lot of some of the work that some of the stuff I presented just then, it hasn't been around for a really long time either. In terms of mentorship, there are sort of a lot of online resources, so a lot of sort of reading blogs, reading books. So there's a bit of sort of self-learning in there, but so much of it has come from speaking with other product managers, more senior ones that have been in the business for longer, and sort of floating ideas and trying things out. Unfortunately, because it's fairly new, you can read around and read about others' experiences and figure out what to do next from there. But some of it's just like things fail and don't work, and then you learn them for the next time round. It is particularly important around sort of your point around mentorship for entrepreneurs specifically. There are a lot of programs, and there tends, there is a push to get more entrepreneurs and sort of commercialize ideas. And so there's a lot of sort of incubators that take these people who do have entrepreneurial aspirations, or maybe they've had ideas and want to take their business to the next level. And so that can be a great program, or those sorts of programs can be great to take people to that next level and provide the mentorship they need.
Great, thank you. That's excellent. Yeah, I think it's the fact you've got such an appetite to try and an appetite to learn. And I think for yourself, when you do that, you demonstrate that as a kind of the inspiration. So that kind of provides kind of you're mentoring the younger entrepreneurs as you go by showing that willingness to try it and go. So I think that's a valid part of your offering, that you are a mentor by just doing the things that you do. So it's, yeah, very inspirational. Thank you.
Thanks, Dion. Rohit's asked, are the same concepts true for physical products as opposed to digital products? I think the concepts do ring true. I think the timelines tend to be longer, so it's not as quick to turn it around. Often with physical products these days, they're not purely, I mean, some of them are purely physical, but there's quite a lot of them that are a combination of physical and digital. And so if you're able to leverage that digital component to get data while you're moving through, let's say, an experiment, then that's what I would recommend at that point. So yeah, I think the concepts can still apply, but sometimes the timelines and the tools you use can be different. But I would strongly suggest the mindset actually works quite nicely for physical products too. Laura, the vision statement, which would differ in terms of length depending on the product category, do you recommend incorporating year 1, 2, 3 timeline for digital versus hardware products? At this point, I would say that I think with the product vision, keeping that sort of long-term makes sense. But in order to execute, yes, some level of planning is necessary, and having an idea of what you're going to do in year 1, 2, 3, or maybe it's quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, is probably the next level down and more around your execution and your planning of how you're going to deliver the product vision in 5 years. But I would say keep your vision statement long-term. But yes, you definitely do need to incorporate a timeline for the delivery of it, and maybe you show which part of the product vision you're executing on in that timeline, or link back to the product vision to show how they are aligned. Okay, Abdul, quick question around defining the problem and your thoughts on if this is an important step to focus on at the start. 100%. I would spend a lot of time defining the problem. In sort of the Google sprint model, you spend an entire day sort of defining the problem. So 100% defining the problem is something that we spend a lot of time on. In some of our workshops that are not run in that Google sprint sort of mechanism, we do have, there are some plays, especially in that IDEO design kit website, they do have ways in which to refine problem statements. So maybe you walk in to an ideation session with a high level problem statement, and then there's this one called, I think it's called Frame Your Design Challenge, I think is what it's called. And that one allows you to refine your problem statement. So spending time on the problem is really important, and I would not devalue the time you spend there before you go into ideation. I think it's really, really important. Well, Coral's given a couple of programs that potential founders with ideas can help to start their business. So that's Entrepreneur First and Antler, in case the audience was wondering. What do you think the future of product management looks like? That is such a big question. Thanks, Mick, for the question. I think there's sort of quite a big transition into the product management space, and I think the future looks complicated. I think like the people going to product management and decide to do it, you have to be on top of a lot of different things, and being on top of sort of the technology piece, but also your customers and keeping on track with that. So I think the future is looking like a lot of people who are very driven and have this desire to know a lot, like a lot of breadth, is where it's going. But I think with the growth of digital products, and basically we're all kind of competing for human attention, it is going to become increasingly important around getting success out of the products that you build. So product management is alive and kicking, and there's a lot of, I guess, development there to happen. I think we're going to continue learning new methods in which to test ideas as early as we can, before we try and invest a lot more money before we get going on them. Okay. What helps you with prioritizing ideas and or features? Yeah, there's a lot of different things that we've tried with prioritizing ideas and or features, and I don't think We haven't necessarily found the best. I can't say I've found the best method yet or anything, but there are, there's some very basic ones like 2x2 matrix where you're looking at the effort versus the impact. So you map the ideas against, is it low or high effort, and is it going to have low or high impact? And if it's low effort and high impact, it's a no-brainer. You should definitely do it. If it's high effort, high impact, you'd probably be thinking about, is it worth doing? Maybe you do it in bite-sized parts. And then if it's low effort, but like if anything sort of low impact, then unlikely that you would do it. So that's one way we do it. There are a couple of other tools that you can use. I think Gartner has quite a few tools that they put out on how you can compare different ideas or projects based on, especially in this space around innovation risk, but how much risk are you taking from a technology perspective? Are you going to be dealing with a very mature technology, or is it brand new? And so that has risk associated. There's also the market type of it as well. So if your customers have to do something new, or you have to access new customers through a new channel, then you've got more risk there. And so there's this risk-based approach that we often use for prioritizing as well, and making sure that, we're doing some things that are low risk, but with high impact, and some things that you just have to go out on a limb to try, because if you don't do it now, you'll never get to do it in the future. How do you work against bias and sunk cost fallacy when the validation shows you're not getting the results you hope for? Yeah, it's a good question, Jeff. How have I worked in the past? I think a lot of the time, if we are satisfied that we have tried to put the minimum testable product, or generally it is the minimum testable product, what is the smallest amount of effort that we can do to get an idea in front of a customer. And if that doesn't show the results we were hoping for, then my mindset is, well, it's a good thing we didn't put 100 people on this idea and instead we had 10. I think it's how the team and your leadership takes the failure as such, or not getting the results you hope for. In some ways, it's not actually a failure. You've just learned something. You probably saved the business a lot of money if they decided to take this further down the track. And so I think a lot of that is the mindset and how you frame it. A lot of it's learnings, actually. So if you sort of take it as that didn't work, so we learned it, and now, either we could change, if we really think that the idea is going to work, we could change it and test it. Or otherwise we'll go, actually, that didn't work in our market. Maybe we need to put that on the back burner, and maybe it needs a different market or a different test method. Would you say marketing to be an integral part of product management? I definitely think that marketing is important in product management, and like a lot of product managers aren't necessarily from a marketing background, but you do work very closely with marketing. So if you're not, like, I don't have a marketing background specifically, but I work very closely with marketing, especially in how we execute our experiments. So there is a very close synergy, and you need a good relationship with marketing in order to be successful. When you're putting together a hypothesis for stay or pivot decisions, how do you scope these out? How do you know that you've hit the right balance between having short enough customer feedback loops to act fast versus having a sizable enough hypothesis that you're actually learning something that's worth the effort of engaging real customers and developing a prototype? That is a very good question. How do you know that you've hit the right spot? I don't think you ever really know. I think you sort of learn from, like, you'll try it and then you'll likely look back on it and go, did that just take a whole lot longer than we expected? And was it worth it for the effort we put in? We generally, sometimes we'll go in there first and we'll scope out something. And more often than not, like, I'll go in and I'll scope an idea. And let's say there's like 6 different parts to it. And then I'll discuss it with the tech lead and with our director, for example, and our product designer, and we might cut it back. And so there's a bit of like back and forth. It is a bit of collaborative effort there on figuring out what is the minimum, but you never really know. And then unless you do it, you don't know if it was any longer, if it took longer or shorter than was actually intended. once you've had a bit of experience, you can compare it to previous ones and go, oh, okay, like, do you think we're learning about the same, or did we learn, are we trying to learn too much from this particular one? I don't think there's actually a way to know if it's the right way. I think sometimes you just have to try and you like hope, and like maybe like over time, if your team will have enough experience, and hopefully you've got enough experience to kind of say, actually, that was the best decision I could make with the information I had. And so being comfortable with the fact that you've made your decisions on the information you had is probably one thing that I would say is important in this particular role. You know, you don't always have all the information, so you get whatever information you can in what you believe is a reasonable time, and then make the decision then. How do you know what your users want and need? It's a really great question. So we've run, like in our sort of business, we have run what we call like diary studies, where we ask a group of patients to sort of write about, you know, what they're thinking and how they found this particular experience. And so sometimes we ask them directly, like, what do you want? But often, you know, your customers don't know exactly what they want, but they often can articulate problems well. So, you know, they will articulate the things that are really annoying. And so there's part of it that's like the user research piece, and going through either interviews or going through surveys. Observation can really help. So sometimes as an outsider, you can watch and see, you know, what's taking what seems like a disproportionate amount of time. So asking people more about their journey and what they do and their workflows is kind of better than going, what do you actually want? Because as someone who's watching the process happen, you can kind of identify where people don't feel so good, or where they don't like doing certain things, or what's taking too much time. So a lot of it actually is you can ask, but trying to figure out problems and mapping them out is how I would say is important. For medical devices or health tech products, are you still allowed to run fake door experiments? Yeah, like generally, okay, if it was an actual medical device, no. But like generally when we're dealing with, like, we're not actually adding extra function. I guess it depends on the exact thing, but putting in a button to see, you know, the desire for it is okay. Often we like would find out from customers if that would actually go down well with them. Do you have any examples of experiments to test a potential customer's willingness to pay in the medical space? We have asked questions post-pilots around willingness to pay, or sometimes we'll ask them questions like, well, how would you feel if we took this away from you? So we have asked questions like that. But we haven't done anything in that space of like testing their willingness to pay. Often in the experiments that we've run so far, we have either made it like there's either been like an incentive, for example, to participate in a study, or we've tried to lower the barriers by providing certain equipment, for example, for them to participate. How do you determine pricing? To be fair, in my current experience, I have not had to do this yet in this experimental piece. So I can't give you a lot of feedback on that question. What's the one blind spot that new product managers have when making the shift into a role from a previously technical background, systems engineering, design? This is a really good question. One blind spot. I think one of them would have to be underestimation of, I guess, the impact that even an experiment can have in a large organization. So I've had this sort of somewhat maybe unique or specific experience of being in an innovation role or in an experimental type team in a fairly large organization. So I think one part that you kind of miss out on when you've been in the technical world for quite some time is like, what is actually required to get something from like you've built it to out to the customer. And so understanding that role is probably a key, or like that process is key in sort of that transition from being an engineer or being from technical background, moving to product management. The other one is you need to make sure you remember that you're not the technical expert anymore. Like, you want to be working side by side with your technical lead, with your product designer. And so one thing is, like, if you've been sort of a systems engineer, you've kind of, at least in my experience, you've kind of been across a lot of different things. When you move into sort of product management, you very much go side by side with your tech lead and your product designer, and you need to sort of be comfortable with whose strengths are whose and working together, rather than you know, feeling like you have to know everything. So if you have had that technical background, it helps, but you also need to make sure that you trust your technical lead and have constructive conversations with them, rather than thinking that you are now the technical lead as well. We just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to leave it at that and thank everyone for their questions. Maybe just one more. Do you stratify test users need to be part of a study? IT people may ask for features they could know be available. Tony, do you mind clarifying that question a little bit? Do you stratify? Is that sort of, are you asking me if we know their sort of background before they do a test, so like it might bias? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So generally we do know this. Sometimes we exclude people who work in our specific industry as well to help. But sometimes, yeah, you do sometimes see this bias, because sometimes the people who like to get involved in studies also tend to be like a bit more enthusiastic and motivated. So you do have to think about how you control your experiment as well. What is your control population and your comparison? Okay, so to finish up, I do have some survey questions for you guys. You just need to grab out your phone, or you can go to slido.com and put in this code. We have 3 quick questions that I would really love to cover off before we finish up today. So the first one is, how would you rate your experience? And basically, as you put in your answers, I'll know just how many people have responded. So at the moment, no one has responded. So if you can, that would be fantastic. Perfect. Cool. So we'll just let that one go through. Thanks everyone for doing this. It's really important that we get a feel for how many people, like how they found it and how we should change it. So really appreciate the instant feedback that we're getting here. Awesome. We've had over 50% respond now. Okie dokes. Kind of slowing down now. Oh, yep. Okay. All right. I might skip over to the next question. So the next one is a bit of a word cloud. So what did you learn today? And once you start putting your words in, it will actually nicely appear on the screen as a word cloud. So that'll be cool. Hopefully everyone kind of took away some new information, and you're very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn as well, if you wish. So hope everyone's enjoying seeing what everyone's saying. Great. Cool. And in the last minute, I am going to flick over to the last question we have for you, which is, what could be improved? And so, yeah, if you guys are able to give your questions, give your responses in there, we'll be able to have a look at that and then try and tailor the rest of our program. The last thing, and I'll leave that poll active so you guys can continue to give responses. That should still work for you if I skip over here. As a last thing, we are selling mugs to sort of get the message out there a bit more. We are running these series for free, but if you are interested in supporting us, please take a look where we've got the teal ones and the white ones as well. So yes, please do, and we will upload the recording soon, both to our social media. We'll share it there as well. Great. Well, hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I thank you so much for being here. And please feel free to send through any feedback, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Thank you.